Robert's here, and I don't know about Ani, so I was going to send her. I don't know if she'll see it though, but
Well, you're 10 minutes late, so I
I
mean,
know, I know.
gosh.
Usually, if she's here, she'll pester me, so
Uh,
she may not be. Hi, Robert.
Good
So
afternoon.
I was. I'm sorry.
uh,
Oh, for you guys, it's morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
uh,
You look like it's warm.
It's 70 degrees.
Oh my.
wait. It's at 70 degrees outside?
Yeah.
Is that like 15 degrees warmer than usual?
Yep.
Um,
But there's no climate change. Don't give me that.
Don't give me that bullshit. Yeah.
Nothing that would get in the way of me making $1 billion. I'm working on my first billion.
Me too.
you, you guys are slackers. I'm like last year I made 10 billion. This year I'm making 40 billion, That's
Yeah, you've
growth.
been playing too much Monopoly. You think that counts.
I feel like I was set up for that joke. You just lured me into that trap and
No, it just came to me. It was
uh,
obvious.
So I have to apologize, but I was on the line on a call with Water Stories. So we've written a grant for students who want to learn how to design land to hold water to be trained with Zach Weiss.
hmm.
And so I was talking to her about what that training looks like and how to interface with a student in a way that makes sense for all of us and that they can really commit to. So that's
I
what
appreciate the apology, but not necessary. And my ribbing about being late was just in jest. It was
oh, it's real exciting. Yeah, it's real exciting. So if we can start doing a cadre of folks here, and I'm thinking actually that might be something that somebody like REI might really like to sponsor.
the sports company, whatever the.
Yeah, because we have a local business here, and I
Oh,
want to get them involved, and I want to apply to the REI Foundation also. So first the store, and if they are interested and would be willing to sponsor a student, um, yeah. So we'll see. It would be okay. So Ani needs the URL again. So let me send that to her.
Yeah, I've had the whole house open in order to air it out. And boy, we live a mile away from a a very heavily used corporate jet, private air aviation airport. Heavily. I mean, it's by far the most heavily used in the state of
Oh
Georgia.
wow.
So if the windows are all closed up, it's very quiet in this house. But as soon as I open up the windows, it's very loud.
Oh
um,
wow.
is it when it's so warm in that region in the winter? Is it humid or is it not humid?
Yes, it can be. It's not nowhere like the summer, but it is humid. Um, it was yesterday, for instance, yesterday evening. Um, but we had a high of 30, 29 or 30 degrees just a week and a half ago. So
The
it's
And
wild.
I think Colorado lost 30 degrees in an hour
Mm.
recently. And I've experienced that there. It
Really?
can change so fast. It's amazing. Yeah. So that actually made the news.
Um, there, God, I mean, even without that point, the when we live in a climate like Robert is describing, where it fluctuates 30 degrees, within a few days. What does that do for your general health?
Or for plants.
Yeah.
I mean, how are plants
Yeah,
adapting
it
to that?
really fakes
Like,
out the
You,
trees.
you can just you have to water your plants a little bit more, your house plants a bit more.
Mm.
I'm
at least,
kidding.
at least, yes.
I, I know you're talking. I was.
Yeah.
Robert, Catherine and I are very much, lots of conversations about nature and environment. So it was just a joke about like, oh, we have our house plants, they'll be fine.
I got it.
Okay.
It's just like, oh, animals are just doing fine. Like my cat, she's in great shape. She's 18 years old.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think of that actually every time they do fireworks in the park here.
Oh.
Because it's just, I mean, I don't know how the birds and the squirrels and stuff deal with that incredible intrusion for 15 minutes of absolute crazy freak out. And they're doing it more often now, because we can do
Well, yeah, and
fireworks.
I mean now people,
Yeah.
they're a month before 4th of July and a month after 4th of July. Well, at least a month
Well, and then
before,
there's Chinese New Year and
and
yeah.
there's regular New Year's and just
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yep.
Lola, our dog, it upsets her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
I get that there are other, that's just she's just an indicator of the other things you're talking about. Um oh, life would be so easy if we just concerned about our house plants and the Lola.
Yeah. 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 I haven't seen fireworks in years because the dog was so scared. And so I just stayed with him. Yeah. And of course, we got the guys who do it on the street right outside the front door.
Yeah, just in case you miss something,
Yeah.
people have left out, right? They're right
For
there.
a few days before and a few days after.
Well,
In Pomona, some of the booms are gunshots.
yeah,
I'm
and
sure.
that's the big thing here. People are shooting, pistols in the
Yeah,
air.
in the air, right. Like they don't come down.
You know, I must say that injury to a human being is rare. You don't hear about it, but on the other hand, you might get a bullet through your top of your car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I keep hoping Annie's gonna swing in, but she hasn't quite yet. I sent her the link, so
There was I remember we were at closing last week when Robert commented about that we should continue the conversation. What was the
yes.
conversation?
I hear you though. And typically at this hour, especially on a Friday, you can get 40 planes per hour.
Oh wow.
It's strictly private corporate direct jets.
Yeah.
Wow.
And maybe half of those are students doing touchdowns and
learning to fly.
take off. And
I saw a note, maybe it was on LinkedIn, that the new CEO of Starbucks, I guess he doesn't want to move, so he's flying 1,600 kilometers a day for commuting in a private jet. But Starbucks is now, if you want a refill, you have to ask for a hard cup. So they're saving the planet by reducing their plastic waste.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been fussing actually with cups for a long time, trying to figure out a way to have one-off cups that are not horrible, that will hold hot water and that won't burn people and won't collapse under use and are still compostable, and they have not yet figured it out. No.
there's no way to figure out workarounds for our technical society. Because ultimately, we're just using too much of everything. So
Yeah.
even workarounds are not saving that much. People don't seem to get, well, I mean, maybe they do understand, maybe the background of 2025 is really that they do understand that to really prepare for global warming is going to
We have
kill
times saying no to ourselves.
What do you say, Robert, when you say maybe the background of 2025 that people will learn?
Oh, I mean, the 2025 plan that's so
Oh,
infamous, that the background of it's basically protection, throwing out any,
Right.
regulations to commercial, bonanza. They're just going crazy. That's the way I read
Oh,
it.
so did you
Much as
click
I
on the
could
link?
read of it, that was just, it was all in for as much development as we could
You, you've been here,
possibly
you do. You
making money
remember?
at the core. Um,
Well, it's whatever you usually use.
Robert, I shared an article with Catherine, I think last night, but it's an idea that I'm probably going to incorporate into a presentation about the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, which is that we have forgotten how much the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act have cleaned up the environment.
yeah.
And but I remember I had this, I'm not as old as you guys, so I was a kid,
Oh,
but
that should take you to the network.
pictures of creeks on fire and
Yeah.
and I
Go to
Googled it, and
public
I found an article here. I'll find it, but it wasn't just little creeks, particularly the Cahoga River in Cleveland. I have this picture of this huge fire and it burned 8 times in 1 year.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, that's an option. You can just be here on the phone.
No, that they have forgotten, and it is all about, maximizing the amount of return for investors.
But I also think the
Yep.
the LEED certification, the green architecture world has forgotten about it. Because and I think this is why we're part of why I think like they poo-poo passive solar or all the great stuff that happened in the 70s.
That's not gonna do it.
I just think with the realization the river's burning gets people to think more holistically, potentially.
Cause I can't.
It's at 70 degrees. Carl's at 59, and I think we're at 21
Degrees
degrees. Yeah.
of temperature.
Yep.
Oh,
Explain to her why we're talking about it, but
love.
I don't know what the temperature is here, but it's pretty out. Sun shining.
Yeah, we got a little sunshine today too.
We've sent an email to Ani.
And we've got about 4 inches of snow.
You do?
It's just the
Gosh.
first real snow of the year.
Boy, we had 3 inches already. Here.
3 inches.
In Atlanta.
It's
to
been
get
a couple of weeks.
sidetracked to these issues. What was a couple of weeks ago? New Orleans got 10 inches of rain or 10 inches of snow.
Right.
New Orleans?
Yeah, but the thing is, my thought was, that's not the annual or the 500-year flood that Houston gets every year, but and it's kind of a wonderful thing in New Orleans, but holy shit, that's climate change too.
Yeah.
We're done.
Hi, Terry.
It's just nuts. It's nuts.
I'll move my car back over.
Okay.
10 inches of snow in New Orleans, quaint, but it's not normal.
No, neither is 3 inches in Atlanta, I don't think.
Robert, where did you grow up?
But mostly in Connecticut, but then
Yeah.
also lived a bit in southern Vermont.
Mm.
So definitely in the north.
Yeah. So you're familiar with mud season?
Mud season.
Because we had a lot of dirt roads in the
Yeah.
area in Vermont. And
Yeah.
so, usually in March, end of March. A lot of those roads were impassable for a week and a half or so.
Like,
Yeah.
like if like there's still rural farms and
Yeah, I looked at teaching in Maine, and that's definitely an issue that you really have to take into account, because there, if there's any dirt anywhere near you, you're stuck.
because
Yeah.
I remember I think my first year in Connecticut in graduate school, I remember thinking, after living in California for whatever 20, 30 years, I guess 20 years, that I remember thinking 9 of the 10 largest rainstorms that I'd had experienced, 9 of them were all in Connecticut in that year, as opposed to 20 years in California. I mean, the idea that it would rain for 3 days. I mean, it just almost never happen in California.
Although I do remember a time when it rained for 3 months, and that was a big deal.
In California,
Oh, yes, sir. San Francisco in particular. Yeah.
like a little bit of rain each day, or
Oh, yeah, no, it was huge. The floods were just tremendous.
what year is that? Is it?
Oh, I'm just trying to think. So I was in Boulder, so it was after 2000, but probably, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Because I lived in Michigan, and then I moved to California, and we kind of walked across the country because we were or in a big truck, which didn't go very fast, and it was so slow. In fact, it was hard to stay awake when you were driving, because it was just. So I felt like we kind of walked across the country. Um, but it was the most sun I had seen in my life, because Michigan has all these gray days because of the lakes. So we have all this fog and all these clouds, and so there's just not that much sun, especially in the winter. And I
Yeah.
was just delirious with sun. It's great. I don't care if it's a drought, it's fine.
Did your truck look like the Beverly Hillbillies? Sorry.
Kids, a dog, yeah, yeah.
I love that shit. One of my this is a very socially astute comment from the Beverly Hillbillies that Jeffro would say, I'm either going to be a brain surgeon or a fry cook.
a brain surgeon or what?
A fry cook.
I didn't understand that word.
So fry, Fry, as in a small diner with a skillet.
Okay.
It's an idea of, I mean, there's so much social commentary or criticism in the Beverly Hillbillies, but presented very sort of brilliant with comedy. I mean, the idea is that it makes those two things equal. So in his mind, a brain surgeon and a fry cook, they're both equal things, which is not at all what Beverly Hills people think it is.
Yeah, our society as a whole would think it is. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'd never seen the show as strong on social commentary, actually.
Also, the Jane, the secretary, is probably, I think they're considered the first kind of gendered sort of vague role. I mean, there's references to her liking women more than men.
Ah, really?
Well,
Wow.
that was amazing in those days.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. I was never really a big fan of the Hillbillies, so I never really watched them,
Yeah, it was closer to how I grew up. So and I was in college, I was a fry cook. So I've been a fry cook. But I loved that line even before I was a fry cook. That's not rationalizing my life. It was It's there are other great examples, but anyways.
Well, it's just given me a new outlook on that show. I may have to watch a time or two and with that mindset and see what I think. Yeah, it might change the whole thing.
You know, it's I think it brings into question the I mean clearly this prestige or privilege, and that these beliefs that come out of privilege. You could be a fry cook or a brain surgeon. What's the difference? And that's a very shocking idea, you know, for much of the
Yeah.
population.
My father was living on a farm near Poughkeepsie, New York, when he was going to grade school. But Wappinger Falls was the actual town. And so he actually went to a little one-room schoolhouse, and he kept skipping grades because he was smarter than the usual. But he used to walk to school, and but he did that after walking his trap line for extra money. He trapped all winter long, or maybe he trapped because otherwise he'd have to be, slopping the pigs. Because that's the other side of my story, is that he if he had to take care of the pigs, of course, he got to school and it's a bit smelly. So he used to talk about that, how he felt when people would make fun of him for stinking up the room, so to speak. And it could have been very strong, especially if the manure was on his feet. And it's winter, you didn't take your boots off in a little one-room schoolhouse. It's probably cold. So I can imagine he may have been pretty fragrant. And even in what it was on the edge of farm town, even then he was, laughed at for, smelling, for doing that work beforehand.
Well, that's interesting. That's the name Wappinger Falls.
Yeah.
That would be a really great name for a television show. Like it just speaks of.
Oh, right. It's great stuff.
It's like like
it's like the one on Alaska, which my daughter and I have been watching. I don't know if you remember, and I can't remember, the name is not coming to me.
Was Norman Lights or Northern Lights?
Northern Lights, yeah. I mean, it's a great show for just that same reason.
Yeah.
It's a lot of social commentary, and it's very funny, and it's this wonderful mix of snobbery and privilege and just folks doing stuff, and Indians that don't talk.
But this was the 1920s, or no, it was teens, 19 teens for my father. And well, there wasn't any Air Force, but the Army Aviation,
Army
Air Corps group, whoever, wanted an airport, and they decided that my father's family's field was designated as what they were going to use. Oh. So they basically eminent domained it.
Wow. Was this in the late 30s or before that?
No, that would have been in early 20s.
Wow. The because in addition to being a regenerative architect, I'm also obsessed with World War II history. But so it was before 39. It was one of 3 airfields where they trained pilots. Well, maybe they didn't train pilots, but there weren't that many. But like in 1939, it went from 3 fields to 100 fields to train pilots. The expansion was. So that was early expansion.
The airport may not have come until the 30s. By that time, my father wasn't there.
Oh, so maybe it
Yeah.
began as an army camp, just a normal army camp.
Right, but they eventually took that land, and of course that changed the fortunes of the whole the whole family.
Yeah, so what happened? I mean, because you couldn't farm anymore, right?
And this was a second income. I mean, basically, my grandmother farmed with the boys helping, because father was a principal of a high school, and yet they still were having trouble getting, making enough.
Yeah. That's kind of
Oh.
interesting. Even at that time, it was hard to make enough.
Yeah,
Because we kind of think of that as a current problem, but
no, it's not. I mean, the it's amazing, some of the movies that we watch from the 20s or teens or turn of the century. And you just get this feeling that it was, really accurate. The portrayal of the whole social construct. And and I've even done some research just to follow up on that. And people were not necessarily desperate, but they worked hard to make and work and had a much, much lower standard of living. Those aspects of these shows are true. And in England, it was even worse. With the workhouses, which were basically reform prisons for people
yeah,
who.
yeah.
Well, to hear that your father was a principal and that he did that.
No,
Yeah, sure.
my father's father
Oh, your
was.
father's okay, but so you're
Yeah, you're kind of sitting on the speaker with the
I am
phone this way.
um so I'm guessing other than Catherine, my all-time favorite hero is Omar Bradley,
Oh,
the very important army general of World War II.
I'm-
And his father was a teacher, but his father died when he was very young. But so he grew up very poor. We had similar experience to your grandfather of, which is probably the same era. Probably, yes, he went finished college at West Point in 1915, but he, to make ends meet to feed his mother, he hunted,
yeah,
Mm.
and
they all did that.
and he became a very, very good shot. But even for an army guy, he was exceptionally good shot because he learned to shoot squirrels. But the life of you know walking great distances, as a poor kid, and I mean I could go on, but his the so very poor of that generation, and the the he was told by a Sunday school teacher because he wanted to go to college, but he just didn't have an idea how to do it. And his Sunday school teacher suggested to go to West Point. And he's like, I can't afford West Point. If you do it, it's free. I mean, it's an amazing story of a poor kid from the country, um, and the fact that the whole process of getting there was also sort of extraordinary things that happened. But he became what some people say is one of the best tactical mind the army has ever produced from this poor kid.
Well, it is amazing, that we seem to be taking on a certain topic right now, but I'll run with it. I mean, I think it's amazing how much life has changed, how much the social, um, the image of how we live socially is just so totally different. But I now remember that some more details. That airport was put in about 1920
That's
because
very early.
or 1918 or 1920, because my father would have been 12 in 1918, and he went up in an airplane,
Whoa.
and that in part is why he started following. He went to college. He was able to go to college, but he ended up working in aviation. He was an engineer, aeronautical engineer, working for Pan Am the entire his entire career. But that was part of the reason, is he got to do this, a little barn. What do they call it? A barn jump.
Barnstormer?
Barnstorming pilot landed, in the fields while it was just starting to be used, and hey kid, you want to go up?
That's you hear this about some of these military pilots. And so he was 34 in 1940.
Yeah,
So
he, if that, then the way the numbers work, yes.
I just did that. I'm not guessing. I used calculator.
Oh,
So he
I
was
wouldn't have, yes.
he was too. And this is what so he was. That would have been much too old for being a pilot in World War II.
Oh, right. No, oh, you mean the pilot?
Yeah, as a bomber pilot or a military pilot.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who was flying the plane, but my father was between 12 and 14
Yeah,
when that happened.
yeah. I was thinking that he become a pilot in the war, but he didn't because he was too
Oh,
old.
no. He was hired by Pan Am, working in the engineering aspect and growing with the company. And he went to the he went to the draft board to was required to go in. He went in, and the military assessment was, you're much more important in the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Was running troop shuttles over to Africa during the war. So
maybe he flew Omar Bradley over to Africa when Omar Bradley took his first first field command.
Conversation.
Oh, well, I'm about to step into the guy conversation, okay? and say that I haven't quite been able to pick up the deep dive thread here. Maybe you could help me pick up the deep dive thread here.
I think the deep dive thread is pulling back the guy thing is how much life has changed, and we're so disconnected from.
Or the girl thing.
So listen,
a deep dive soul thread.
I think Carl's trying to weave that, so let's hear what he had to say here.
Okay.
For me, it's the like when I was talking about Omar Bradley, it's the how he grew up, and he grew up, how his growing up very poor shaped his life, and even as a very powerful general, he was still a farm boy at heart, and it shaped his world.
Us here, oriented to we who have gathered here for our own edification.
Well, I think there is a link, actually, because one of the concerns that I have about now is the disappearance of guys. They are not showing up in college. They haven't for decades. When I was teaching, most of my students, and I was teaching leadership and strategy and those kinds of things, and most of the people in my classroom were women.
True. I didn't. I'm surprised that you said that, but I was thinking, it's for me, it's kind of what we're talking about, is the disappearance of people who grew up on the farm and connected to nature.
Well, but there is what I'm hearing in that conversation is a drive that comes from farm life, that you just do what you need to do. That's just how you are raised, because the cows need to be fed, the corn needs to be planted. If you don't feel comfortable, if it's raining, it doesn't matter.
The squirrels need to be shot so you can eat.
You just do stuff. And now that seems to have disappeared. People don't.
Well, I think, but that drive is not gendered specific. It's
not gendered, and it's really not of a time. But it was more common in our population than it seems to be now. I mean, that's part of the whole Magna thing, frankly, is that they're wimpy because they're not being included and they don't get why, and yet they won't go to school, and then they self-medicate because they feel so bad, and then they blame the culture because they're not successful and it's against them and all of that. I mean, this is really part of the rationale. And it's just, I mean, I don't know what you do about that. You've got these guys sitting in their parents' bedrooms on the computer all the time and hacking stuff to prove that they're manly and wimping because women don't want to date them because they don't have any money or future. Yeah. I mean, this is real stuff. And it's just like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that with people who feel that they're owed something, and it should be spoon fed because they
What's
don't.
this? There's this movement, this self-proclaimed young man movement, and there was a guy in Santa Barbara who killed a girl or something because he couldn't get a date. But there's a term for it, and
Well,
they boast about it,
yeah,
and
well,
they
there.
blame women for not being able to get a date, even though
Yes, yes,
they're everything you just described.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Um, I mean, I think this is
Carl,
yeah,
Carl,
yeah.
what wisdom did you glean from what Catherine is saying, or what did you hear in what Catherine is saying that's edifying?
Um, well, it's a deepening of an understanding of um, what makes us humans, and given this, the way we are living today, it's we're being disconnected from being human beings as human beings have been for the last forever,
Mm.
and to the connection to farming, that other life was a way of it was is um, connected people to each other and to the land, and that's so the I think the importance of this, the idea is to understand how we live today and how it's where our values come from. Hey, I use the word values.
We are so disconnected from reality. I mean, that for me is one of the certainly one of the mega issues that we can just create the world because of how we choose to see it, which has a level of truth. But when it comes down to surviving and the basic prosaic thing of staying alive on the planet, there's a kind of truth there that you don't get. You can't pretend that the cows are going to be fine. They're fed or they're not fed. you know, you can't pretend that it's going to be okay if I don't do that today. And we're so outside of that kind of tangible reality. We really are caught in our heads and we're creating all these things. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to um, invent this AI thing that's going to just transform us and all that kind of stuff. And that has nothing to do with staying alive on the planet. And we've forgotten all of that. We just assume that that's going to happen because, something magically will take care of us. Well, we can go to the supermarket and buy food. Well, we won't
Yeah,
be able.
there's a line that you hear people, I think, kind of say, within not as sarcasm, but something, like, well, I'm not so concerned about dairy cows because I can get my milk at Whole Foods.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That disconnect is really there. I mean, that's why for me soil is so important because once you get your hands in the dirt and you start to see what you can do with that and that you have agency in bringing life forth, that you can see the difference because of your efforts. I think that's really, pardon the pun, grounding. Yeah, it really
It's
brings
grounding
people.
is
Yeah,
that's a really
it brings people back into reality, and to what really works and what we can really do because we're just so lost in this misma of electronic stuff and fantasy that it's just not connected anymore. Yeah. And
I find authenticity in what you're saying. I find my soul in what you're saying. I find myself feeling a human being as you're speaking in this framework, Catherine, and I appreciate that. It's like a wise woman, and we have kicked to the curb wise women,
yeah.
and are into brainy, heady, male creativity,
See,
whatever.
I
don't
don't
know.
I don't think it's male either. One of the things that came up today in HR, which was HR, by the way, today was all about Eros. And Eros is the sensuality of the world and ourselves, and how that connects us to reality. And actually, more than reality, that it is a path to transcendence, but not as overcoming or ignoring or pushing away the physical, but integrating it, which is very different because most of Western history is about pushing away the physical, that it's not something we do. And I think Robert talked the last time about the coldness that the upper crust in New York carries, because that's the manly way of dealing with all the hard things you have to do in order to make money.
When you say the pushing away the physical, you mean the physical, like literally physical labor, like we were talking about.
No, well, and part of physical labor is the experience of it. Um, oh, they just that's a whole other segue. So logging, fire people, policemen, warriors are all about the physical sensations of power you get in those areas, wrestling big machines, um, fighting, undergoing hardship. There's a physical experience in that that has been defined in the past as part of masculinity. What it's missing is the joy the body gets in being used, which is one of the hooks in that. But without recognizing that joy piece, you're locked into those forms and you can't get out of those negative expressions of it, because that's the only place we really see it. I think that's one of the disconnects that we're dealing with. A lot of people, men in particular, need the physical tactile working with things. Their body needs that. It feels good to be in that kind of
Some kind of
place.
genetic memory or something like that.
And how do we do that now? You sit behind a desk for, 30, 365 days a year. There's no physicality in that. There's
Well,
no really using your body, and that's lost.
even if you're going to the gym every day,
Yeah,
it's not the same.
it's not the
I'd
same.
much rather, go out, grab hold of a horse, a horse's lead rope, calm it down, get the thing saddled, and
Yeah.
and go riding than
Yeah.
than to ride some bicycle machine looking at TV. I mean, it's just crazy.
It's not the same.
It's
Yeah.
it's the Abe
Yeah.
Lincoln's the myth of splitting what are rails
Yeah.
and at the risk of upsetting Ani.
Well,
uh,
I want to go a little further with the Eros thing, because it's not,
what's the arrows thing? What's the
it's Eros,
oh, okay.
okay, which is love expressed in a physical, sensual way. Andreas Weber does this in biology. His books are all filled with this sensual understanding of the interaction between life parts, life people, life cells. Um, and we shy away from that. We're all schooled, even all religions, everybody tells you not to do that, not to go there. And one of the things she was talking about is the power of that place, because when you hit that authentic energy, it is explosive in a very real sense. And so the difficulty of managing the thought was that the difficulty in managing that place and being able to stay and hang on to that energy in a way that doesn't implode or cause damage takes effort, takes discipline, takes practice. And rather than do that, we've discarded it. We've tried to fence it off so that we don't have to risk the danger of that in our life and the poverty that that brings to life when you do that.
The poverty
It's
of,
just not
of
fulfilling.
the poverty of the soul, or the
Yeah, it's just not fulfilling. I mean, like Robert says, you can sit on a bike and watch TV and exercise your body, and it does not feed your soul at all.
um
It's empty. It's like it's fast food, you know.
the
Yeah.
the a very large part of the inspiration I get from reading Omar Bradley is, he was this enormously powerful historic figure, but he was a man. He grew up, grew up very poor, um, and even as a retired, as a very powerful general, his sense of humanity is still there.
Yeah.
And I find it enormously inspiring to read his writing, because he by all measures represents a success and manness of me. But today, I probably, even people who maybe come from his background, that's not even something we talk about.
Yeah.
And um and in some extent, Eisenhower, both these guys were very poor growing up. Eisenhower wasn't quite as poor as Bradley. But there's this really great stories about, when they were very powerful generals in the war, about, the humility that we just don't see anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that to me is an example of, regardless of how successful they were or are, that they held on to their childhood humanity, which is really hard to do today.
Well, today we have so much privilege and we're so separated from well, things are done for us. We don't do all that much. So we've lost both the agency and the self-confidence and the self-understanding that comes from working hard.
Humility.
Yeah. I mean, it
There's
gives you
I
humility.
mean,
I mean,
there's this great story when, right before D-Day, Eisenhower's talking to these paratroopers going to jump in, and probably a lot of them were going to die, not as many as they thought were going to die. And he's talking to this lonely, whatever, sergeant or private, and they're talking about what they did before the war. And the guy said, well, his, I was a farmer, and like, how many acres did your family farm? And like, whatever, 800. And like, my family only farmed 250. So maybe after the war, I'll get a job from you. I mean, the idea that you have this enormously powerful general saying to a private, well, maybe I'll come back and get a job with your family because it's your family's farms 800 acres instead of 250 acres. I mean,
yeah,
that's to me is an enormous lesson about humility and humanity, and that's we just don't have today.
yeah, yeah. We don't have those
Nice.
experiences.
Nice.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. We don't have those experiences anymore. We're so separated from it. And the more we're in cities, I think the less we're going to have, frankly, because there's just not the opportunity to engage with the planet and to test your strength against, the rest of life out there in a way that's productive and not destructive.
Well, also, how can a child possibly learn how to navigate its way through life when, your mother can be arrested for allowing you to walk unescorted at age 8,
Yes.
say,
Yes.
you know, for a quarter
Yes.
mile, to the park. That's just insane.
That's crazy. Yep.
does this actually happen?
Would you?
Yes.
Yes, it did. So there was a young child, and I can't remember if it was a boy or girl, went to the store to get something and something happened to the child, and the mother was arrested for not taking care of the child, not being appropriate in her parenthood. She should
Black
not
woman?
have left the child out of her sight.
Was it a black woman?
No, white.
No.
Yeah, no, it was just outrageous, just
And
outrageous.
I know others who are, young white couples who, are trying to range free range children. I mean, there's even a term now coming out
Yes.
because, from, I understand that from 8 in the morning, probably 7 in the morning until 5:30 or 6 at night, I was
You
free
are right.
range. I had many,
Yep.
many square miles to fool around in up in Vermont.
Yeah. I want to
And
let
I
Ani
can't
say
imagine
something.
not having had that in my upbringing.
Yeah, yeah, it would be totally different. Ani had something to say a minute ago. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Annie.
Uh, it's about the evolution of humanity, and our take of the evolution of humanity seems to be exterior stuff. Seems
Yeah.
to be stuff we make up, stuff we do, stuff, not who we are and how we are on a soul level,
Yeah.
on a heart level. And so we really have to reevaluate what we understand as evolving. It's got to be interior first. Got to be.
Yeah.
Or, it's got to be. Because evolution, yeah. Anyway, I that's the point.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's not our focus. Our focus is exterior
As a culture. Yeah.
as a culture, not soul as humanity.
No, that's where the Eros thing comes in for me, is because it's very much interior. It's all about how you handle the energy inside of yourself that gives you pleasure. I mean,
Yes.
that is not an easy process. It's so easy to opt out of that, to not allow it to really be fulfilled, to shortcut it in some sort of way, to dabble along the edges so that it feels okay, but it's not really confronting, it's not really engaging. And that's kind of what she is, um, has developed a way of getting people involved.
When you say
And
she, the a particular writer, or
Right.
yeah, Rachel was her first name. I can find out her last name. She has a website, which I have here.
the as a
Wait, we want to hear who this is.
Okay, so it's going to take me a second here to go to a different window. I think. Sorry. So why don't you talk and let me do this, because it's going to take me a minute to sift through where we are.
this always looking for like how do we get there? Absent of people like Robert's grandfather and father growing up on a farm, and Omar Bradley, and absent of that's not going to happen. And that, as you said, Catherine, because when we're living in cities, we're so disconnected. How do we close the gap? How do we create an alternative way of being this way?
Well, yeah, and I think there are lots of different ways. Rachel Pelletier is her name, Pelletier. And she actually has an app and a practice, and it's called erotic meditation.
Love it.
So,
Boy, that would be made fun of on the
well,
internet.
they're going to do a course. They're going to do a summit on eroticism at some point. That Ubiquity will do that. So, in a couple of months, he'll probably announce that, because they're working together. So it's really, it's just very interesting, just very interesting. And she's got a lot of courage. She's in her 40s. She's a beautiful woman. And It's just a very interesting thing she's taken on.
Yeah, and I don't know any other way than to change ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, me, change me.
Well,
Me.
and being able to really accept the joy you feel is not an easy task. It just is not. When you really feel it, it's just really easy to say, "Oh, that's so nice," and you just skip right out of it very easily. To so it doesn't really hold you. The stamina of staying in that space, as and her phrase, until the end, to really take it as far as it will go, really takes practice. It is not something that we can do easily.
How can you define, describe that experience?
And that's another piece of the meditation, is being able to do that to another person, to be able to describe your experience to another person.
Nice.
That is part of it.
Oh boy, I'd love us to do that. Here now, us.
No, it's not something you could just do here now, us. That's not the way it works. And it is physical. It is not just we're talking about it. It's actually doing things to give us that experience, to be in that practice, to develop that capacity. It's not just talk.
Nice.
Well, let me give you an example. The reason I was a little late, I was saying goodbye to this carpenter who'd come over to help me
Ah,
as we're redoing the shower. And this part was, I'd figured it out. It was way too complicated to describe to him. So I've been working all morning with him, and just, it's like amazing how much my body just, you know, misses that kind of energy, that kind of action. And I just totally
Oh,
zoom right in to, grabbing the right peat, running up the hill to get something because we're trying not to keep, and it's just an all encompassing reversion to the type of energy I had in my 30s as a building contractor. I was a design build business, Carl. And right now my body is feeling absolute joy. It's funny to hear you talking about that, because that's just the way my cells are tingling right now. And tired, very tired.
I'm not going to compete at the mano hitting, working as a design builder contractor with a hammer and stuff, but because I don't do that. But I still draw with pencil and pen. I actually don't do computer drawings.
Oh wow, that's
But
really
but I very much believe that we miss by we miss our humanity because everything's done in a computer machine,
right.
and we're not drawing lines on a paper. You don't feel that the the I'm not going to say I don't want to make drawing with a pencil the same as a hammer, but it is, it's less physical, but less like muscles, but the act of doing it, there's no
tactile.
substitute, or having that machine between um the
Yeah.
the act of making or designing something and drawing it with your hand. It's
I'm definitely not dismissing what you're saying, Carl.
no,
I
I know you're not. No,
I absolutely accept that analogy. That and I love to draw by hand myself, but I do use
oh.
the computer a lot.
Why? Um,
Yeah, there's something about doing things ourselves that is so satisfying that you just don't get when you create in any other way. Um, yeah, I although I will have to wonder, because there's this fascination with large pieces of machinery. I attended the Spokane Ag Show a couple of days ago. And they had machines in this room that were probably 2 to 3 times taller than I was. I mean, the wheels were taller than I was.
These are combines or something, or
Yeah, combine. I don't know what they were. I didn't inquire. But yeah, they do all sorts of things. They plant, they harvest, they do all that stuff. And and there's something wonderful about owning one of those at the several $100,000 that it's going to cost you and put you in debt in order to do the work that you do, and probably something at least partially satisfying about being able to manage it and control it and make it do stuff. Um, so there's that kind of satisfaction, but it gets you away from the land. You no longer have that real relationship with what you're doing. Um, so it's kind of interesting. I mean, I can't imagine a child going through and seeing those things, and what the feeling is of, oh my God, my father owns one, or it's something that we see on the farm. It's just got to be overwhelming. Um, and it makes it feel magnificent, even though you kind of miss the separation that it also generates. Yeah, they're pretty awesome.
Well, I've got to get going. It's quarter to
Oh, it is. Yes.
the hour. I find these sort of, we're taking different pathways than maybe we have a lot of the time in the past, but I think it's very important to start covering our culture a bit more. There's no question how important it is now to understand that we have changed in 80 years. And, if things aren't going so well now, what can we possibly do about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, good to
I think
see and hear you, Annie. And I'm going
Ani has something she wants to say too.
okay.
Could you help me remember the man who built the circular thing?
Name Buckminster Fuller?
Buckminster Fuller.
Yes.
Oh,
What is it he brought forth? Because
I'll see you
somehow-
guys.
Okay. Thanks, Robert.
Goodbye, Robert. Okay. Somehow he's coming forth in this to me.
So he created the geodesic dome. That's what.
It.
Yeah.
no, actually, technically, a student did. He stole the idea, but
Well, and I mean, I've always appreciated Buckminster's Fuller's philosophy in a lot of ways. And one of the things he said was, instead of telling people they shouldn't do something, you create something that draws them to it.
yeah.
So it was a thing in my email for a long time. Uh, but he still was not, I guess I want to use the word organic. He was not really connected to the earth. He still had a very mechanical way of thinking about the world, even with all his brilliance.
Yeah. Ani, did Catherine answer your question, or because um I have a particular um and unusual take on Buckminster Fuller, which I completely agree with Catherine's saying about his philosophy. But using like people, green architects, sort of sustainability people, um, they're drawn to the dome and they believe things about the dome, which is just scientifically thermodynamics, everything else is not true. There's this belief system that it does something that it doesn't do. And I would also conclude, and I completely agree with what Catherine said, is that he is a man of his time, where he didn't have any problem, putting a dome over Manhattan, and the energy problem is solved by pumping oil into the situation. So he's very much a man of his time, where it's a mechanical solution, or using petroleum to hydrocarbons to solve a problem because that's what they did. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, he had a lot of wisdom, but he was really very caught in that whole milieu and did not see outside of that box.
is that so Anna, is that what was your draw to Buckminster Fuller?
It was just it was just I don't have any piece of wisdom about that. I just was I was just aware. He just presented himself to me in this dialogue, and I remember the innovative thrust that he was about.
Yeah. Yeah, he really did stir the pot in some ways. It just was
Yeah.
not organic at all.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree with Catherine, like his philosophy and certain ideas. What I find I can be cheeky or sort of critical of these people who follow Buckminster Fuller who don't get that point. They
Yeah.
don't see,
Yeah.
they have
He's a
they
god.
don't they this and like literally people they say a dome. They have this idea that a dome is more energy efficient just because it's a dome, and that's completely contrary to any other shape that I know from architecture or history. Like what kind of shape makes something more energy efficient, and it's not a dome. But there's this whole world out there of people who say, "Oh yeah, it's a dome, so it's more energy efficient." And one little factoid is in efforts to try to find some data on what it takes to um, cool or provide thermal, cool a dome. And the best source I found was from an article about the those domes in Arizona that they built to that they were gonna create this artificial environment inside.
The earth houses. Yeah.
So that no, not the earth houses. No, um it was like a big terrarium and this is in the 80s.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I have actually been there.
Yeah. And um and I found something from some data from a person and I forget what they're doing, how they're using it now. But the person says, because there's a big dome glass covered, and in the Buckminster Fuller people think even a dome that's completely covered with glass, which is just like in the middle of a desert, requires a huge amount of energy to keep cool. But they don't. But they have this idea. It's a dome, so it's going to be better. And anyways, in this article, this guy says, like they use thousands and thousands and millions of BTUs to keep it cool, and then he says, "Well, of course it's expensive. It's a glass dome in the middle of a desert." And that one little piece of fact doesn't penetrate Mr. Fuller guru or people.
Yeah, they were using these domes to mimic being on the moon
Yeah,
so that you could stay forever. You could live for years inside that dome and not have to go out at all.
yeah, yeah.
So there
That
were a
was the
number of
experiment. It was
yeah. Yeah, I was in one in Arizona. I have photos actually. Yeah.
so anyway, that's my so completely agree that his philosophy were very insightful. Um, but I just find it hilarious that in that the in like the all these there's other things he created like a house and something that people believe is brilliant and works really well. And I mean, I think of it as these guys, people who think this way, they ignore two and a half of the laws of thermodynamics. You know, which is that's just one way
So
I
say
try to.
more about what those two laws are.
Well, three laws.
Three laws. Okay.
But there's three laws of how energy is heat or energy is transferred. It's radiation through the sun, or for a direct, like if you're standing 10 feet from a fire, whatever, and you're feeling warm, that's also radiation.
Right.
and then there's conduction, which is, you know, if you touch a hot pipe and that heat is being transferred through that hot pipe, you know, a physical thing, that's conduction. The heat is being conducted through whatever the substance. And then there's convection, where heat is being transferred through the air.
And
So
Alpha
if you're,
Low,
I'm sorry.
Alpha Low, do you know who he is?
Mm-hmm.
So Alpha, Alpha Low is a guy who's really big in the water circles now. And he posits that there is a fourth law, and that it's moving from energy to process. As I may not be doing this justice, I have to kind of read what he said. And he tentatively put that out there, 6 or 8 months ago. And I actually had an interview with him and tried to get him to talk about it, but he's afraid to, because one, that's a pretty big proposition that you're saying there's a fourth law of thermodynamics. It's not something you would say gently. And he wants to be an academic, and so he's afraid of the ridicule that he would get. And he feels it would diminish his chances of getting a PhD or getting into a school for a PhD. But it's interesting to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, all of my understanding of making buildings energy efficient, they all fit within those three laws, but you know, I don't know how.
Well, but water may not. That's kind of his point, I think, because water is the mechanism by which nature cools and manages the temperature on the planet. And it's water
Yeah.
changing form. Every time it changes form, it either uses heat or gives off heat.
Yeah.
And so that flux is really how temperature is managed. So in the biotic pump, that's one of the big key pieces, is that when you have that process going on, when you encourage that and make it work, I'm losing you, Annie, sorry, this is a spot where you show up.
That's perfect.
When you allow that pump to function correctly, then it's cooling, because it's water is changing form often enough to release heat into the atmosphere, which it does when it goes from solid to vapor. That's where a lot of that energy is lost, and that's lost at a high enough altitude in the clouds that it can go up and out, so it's not held on the planet.
Well,
And
that would be that would be going to space. And
yes,
I'm not arguing this, because then that changing in the change of molecular whatever of the water, that
mhm.
there might be something to that. But
Yeah, they can measure it.
that the heat going from whatever that is to space is radiant. It's
Yes.
moving. It's but it doesn't. I'm not. That's within the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah, no, I'd have to read again how Alpha put that to
Yeah.
be clear about his thought process, because I do feel there's a grain of truth in what he's saying.
Yeah, maybe in the there's this idea, and I don't know very much about it because this is sort of chemistry, but where there um it seems like it fits within this idea that, because we think of water goes from liquid to solid, you know, it has to go from solid, ice, liquid to gas, like when you boil it.
Right,
But
right.
there's this, I think, chemistry or something, chemistry sort of idea, that it's possible to go from ice to gas without going into being a liquid.
Well, and there is now
That
another
might
book
be.
on the fourth stage of water, which is talking about oh, Robert should be here. He would know what I'm talking about. That there is another form of matter, and Roberts brought it up in different ways, because in space they're also seeing this, that it's not empty.
Is it
There,
dark matter?
no, it's not plasma. That's the
Oh,
term. And so there's this book is about the fourth stage of water is plasma also. And I don't know if there's a connection. I haven't read the book or any of that, but in Robert's world, there is a lot of plasma in space, and that is a connection mechanism. It is places where information is stored and can be utilized. So
Information is stored.
yeah.
Yeah. I would just like to say how much I appreciate who we are and what we're doing and how we are, and that it's really a deep dive. I appreciate that very much, being part of the deep dive with you.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you as well. So hopefully you can get on next time. So we'll have to work on that. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you both. Bless you all.
Okay. All right.
All right. Until next week.
Okay. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Ani is filled with qualities that stretches my being.
Well, she's an Aries.
uh,
Yeah.
um, it's interesting because I like to think that even again, I know a lot about World War II and all that military stuff and blah blah blah. But to read Omar Bradley, which I've read his books maybe 10 times,
Yeah.
but it has that history and battle and whatever, but it's his sense of humanity that makes it so so compelling.
Yeah.
And the idea that he, as an extraordinarily powerful general, he maintained his sense of humanity and his humility. That doesn't happen very much.
Right.
And I think, if within our conversation, it really happens less today because of where we
People
are
don't have
culturally.
that same experience. They're not growing up on farms anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they don't test themselves in that way.
I mean,
They don't
you wouldn't
appreciate
brag
themselves
you
in
wouldn't
that.
brag about just being able to shoot a squirrel. It's about like I don't know. It's like what kind of car you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, and it's a time you slipped in the mud and it was really a mess and you slogged through anyway and you did bring it home for dinner and wasn't that great. But that slipping in the mud is not an ego building experience, but it's still, you still had the fortitude to go through it. That is an ego building experience. And we don't do that if you're sitting behind a desk or you're playing.
ego, a positive ego.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You're
mean,
rooted.
yeah, your strength, your sense of yourself, which is truly what ego should be instead of the presenting self, which is what it usually is.
Say that again. The what's called the ego.
So okay, in my world, there's two parts of it. And so the real ego is the understanding of self. The one that we mostly share with people, our false persona, is what we want other people to see ourselves as. And that's where we hide things and distort things and do all that kind of stuff. But that's, for me, part of the purpose of meditation is you begin to see who you are, and you don't have to do that anymore. You can be more honest. I have a wonderful book on self-deception. It's just great and they describe it as a box we build to keep ourselves in focus.
I'm sorry for using Omar Bradley again, but this is it's as he went through the West Point, which is kind of it's kind of amazing how he got there, and um um even as during the war, as this general who commanded whatever 1.8 million soldiers, more than anybody commanded in the field in the U.S. military. He his self was defined by you know the values, the qualities that he learned from his father. so he's described, he's often described, the big moniker as the GI General. He still cared about the GI.
Right.
But an expanded description, even though he was a 4-star general, became a 5-star general, he had the character of a country school teacher, which is, that's not something no one's going to describe. Certainly, Elon Musk is not going to describe himself as a country school teacher. That would be the last thing.
Yep.
That gets, to come full circle, the quote from Jeffro, I want to be a fry cook or a surgeon, brain surgeon. It's that thing where you're still a person. It doesn't matter whether you're a fry cook or a surgeon. You're still who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah, you've given me a whole new outlook on that show.
And
that is not where I would have gone with that show at all.
Getting sidetracked here. There's the other one that I remember was really hilarious. Jeffro goes to the Hollywood Bowl and sees this fancy violinist. So that next day he wants to be a violinist. and the banker or whatever, Mr. Drysdale.
Drysdale.
Oh, actually, he hires the guy, that famous violinist, and they come to the mansion, and Jeffro already has a collection of violins that he's been working on, including a violin, a wind-up violin, a little toy. And the guy comes in and is like, "You're crazy," Jeffro's holding up a cello like it's a violin, so because he doesn't know they're all the same shape, but he isn't told this is this and this is this, and all the cultural value of knowing what those things are. And the guy says something like, "Are you crazy? How can you like that?" And Jeffro's response is, "Well, this is kind of hard to hold this one up, but it's really hard to hold that one up." And the camera pans over to a bass, a stand-up bass. So all of this pretension about knowing these things, I just, it's so much. It says a lot of that issue of how we define ourselves.
Yeah.
So to this question, to like what our core of our work about how do we connect to nature? I had from between what you just said in this conversation and what was presented yesterday in Andrew's thing, this woman from the redesigning Eden.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. I think when I sent that email, I had seen on her LinkedIn page one of these freaking stupid vision of a future city of radial things. And another piece of information is she mentioned yesterday that we need to redesign cities because we're all going to live in cities today or in the future, which I think is horseshit. Our planners and architects are telling her that, and I think it's whenever I hear planners and architects say that,
well, we forget that you're in a city only because you've got all this infrastructure outside the city that feeds it.
Yeah,
and that historically cities have only gotten as big as you could transfer stuff from the outside into the city.
Yeah.
It couldn't be any longer than that, depending on the amount of transportation you had at the time.
Completely agree. So these so when architects and planners, and now Kamara, because she's listening to these people, when they have this idea, they're not thinking, they don't know enough about history to or the practical thinking.
They're just not thinking. That practical piece of where do you get your food if you're in a city? Is it possible to grow enough food in a city for 1 million people? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's
That's all right, you know.
So I remember in like in 2014 or so, I was actually part of a panel, and even beyond that, it was really quite common, like in the architecture planning world, by 2050, 70% of the population is living in cities. And my reaction to that, because of my lesson in Turkey, where cities collapse, or in Rome. Rome once had 1 million people, then it had 35,000. Like, it doesn't just, the idea that it's just going to always get bigger is, I'm getting kind of
Oh,
cranky and stuff, but it it's an idea that comes from not knowing history.
yeah. Oh, and just
Um,
not thinking, for heaven's sakes. I
yeah,
mean,
or whatever. But so but particularly this, so that when you said about when you talked about, so she said, we're everybody's gonna live in cities. Oh, I would just finish that thought. So, so this idea from, before COVID that cities would always get bigger. And I'm thinking, yeah, hold on. And now COVID comes, with COVID, the parts of the city emptied out,
right.
the parts of New York, and, those buildings are not, the office buildings are not occupied at the same level.
Yep.
Just one example of something's going to happen. And I know that something else is going to happen, but so to this point about kind of connecting the dots. This vision in Mayfield, the typical radial space, it's this kind of part of the vision of the scene that she's presenting as a future city. It also comes from these images from the 70s about inhabiting space. These kind of pod things.
Okay.
Why not? I just think more and more about it, but it's so she talks about, and I'm not trying to like make her wrong. This is because it's representative of what people are thinking. So it's an idea of a city that really it's about geometry, not about nature. And so the closing the loop is, so this question that you said, how do we design cities that are really connecting us to nature? Um, as a model, village homes is a whole lot closer than these
Right.
pods on a radial pattern. It's
Well, you know, the fun of a radial city is that you can put cannons in the center and you can just shoot down the streets.
well, that's
You know, that's
if you haven't, maybe you knew that before, but that's my
I did. Yes.
you're stealing my my thunder. That so and actually I wrote in an email in LinkedIn. I said, that form, the origins are 16th century. Maybe it was the email. So it comes from perspective and the canon. And I think in any questioning of where things come from, you need to know where it came from.
It's useful. It's useful.
It's and
Yeah, but it's
it doesn't come from biology. It doesn't come from
no, it's
it
not.
comes
That
from
wasn't the
can.
thinking that brought it into existence. Yeah,
And
it's easier to kill people.
somehow there's a truth to it that the if the source is canons and and not nature, and so that whenever you use that form, it's not going to work with nature because that doesn't come from nature.
Well, and we could talk about the value systems from that perspective. So from a protective value system, the radial system is perfect because it gives you a very clear way of making sure that forcing people down that street and you can kill them all in one shot. It really helps.
That's
Now,
a
when you get into effective and you're trying to prove how great you are, then you get this really tall, you get Dubai with fancy shapes and huge structures that are proclaiming our magnificence to the heavens. But when you come back to life, then you want engagement and relationship, and that changes the whole
okay.
structure.
So this is another paper. We probably talked about this, but this is a really good important paper as part of is that thinking about looking analyzing urban form, architectural form with your value systems.
Yeah, I got a whole presentation on it, but it's probably
So,
could be deeper with your experience.
well, it's just architecture always makes everything deeper. I'm
Well, it's
kidding.
permanent.
I wasn't sure. So see, that's my mechanism. No, the insight would come from combining the two worldview. And so, I mean, just so even like so when you said protected value, like yeah, I mean that's
Yeah,
more rooted in human beings than me talking about perspective and canons. So but you're right, and I think and maybe
you
that's
get
why.
moats and castles from that, you know?
Yeah, well, technically the radio plan, because the walls were low,
Yeah,
the moats and castles became ineffective. But
yeah,
that's the stuff. But the value is the same. It's about how to be,
that's right.
So the castles, the tall walls and the moats no longer, they had to find another solution because the canon
Yep,
made those things
obsolete.
obsolete, and so they didn't protect you anymore.
Yep, exactly.
So this question of the thing that the way Carl says it, like why in the hell do all these ecological people keep coming up with this radial thing? And maybe part of the answer is there's some part of us it's knowable. It's sort of a
The
geometric.
circle and the spiral are inherent in so much. And so the circle form has this cocooning,
Yeah,
this nurturing aspect to it. And I think that's what grabs people.
yeah, because it's
It feels inclusive in that way,
yeah,
even
and
though
it's
that wasn't the design. Yeah.
that's a pretty profound way to talk about village homes because it's and a question for the Corbetts. How much? And this might be this might be part of their inspiration from Jane Jacobs.
Yeah. So I'm going to
Um,
talk to Ricardo today or try and connect with him and see if the
yeah,
Corbett's, if he can
tell
come
him
with
tell him
that
that I say
chapter.
hello and that I'd like to connect to him. But because I like him so much. Um, but the other thing, and I meant to mention, the um, Judy Corbett, her bachelor's degree was in human ecology.
In what?
Human ecology.
Oh, human ecology. Okay. Yeah.
I sort of imagine she was the first person to get a degree in human ecology. This is probably in the 60s, right? So this is,
Yeah.
it's
A
probably,
lot
it was
happened in the
probably,
60s. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
A lot happened in the 60s.
Yeah. More of the stuff that happened, more of the stuff we think happened in the 60s happened in the 70s now.
Well, it
Uh,
was the outgrowth of really coming back to humanity in the 60s, then
yeah,
the
no,
outgrowth
it's
of all that stuff in the 70s. Yeah. And then it was
with
co-opted in the 80s with Me Too.
and erased because of cheap oil. But
Yeah.
to use Judy Corbett, I'm totally agreeing that as I imagine, so her degree, I'm sure she was in college in the 60s. And so the idea of human ecology, I think, was pretty new.
Yep.
And in the 70s, with her husband, it became the realization of those values.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I want to clearly articulate that to say that I agree with you. But um um yeah, you think about, to think about village homes compared to the radio plan, it's so um um vulnerable, if you will, to that's the thinking of it, right? It's open-ended, it's open and by these values of the radial thing, you're exposed.
Well, you're
But
in a relationship is what you are.
yeah, no, I just think, thinking from this
Yeah.
other side.
That's right.
And one of the things that you would be exposed to is, and this is what the city was telling me, you're going to be exposed to flooding. You're going to be exposed to sun, the nature.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say it, they don't say it that way, but that's there in the background.
Yeah. 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 No, we've been
And
fighting nature, protecting ourselves from it for a long time. Yeah.
yeah, this is really, we've touched on this before, but this is a really profound point of and even with Kamara, this idea of, this, we're going to live in cities, but we're going to grow food in cities. But it's still this. In fact, one of the things she said yesterday, a number of people kind of, I don't know, jumped on her. Like, oh, that's a value coming from, we are separate from nature, and she kind of corrected herself. But it's a value. But I think she hasn't. She still holds. It's still shaping her. This idea that we
Yeah.
are different from nature.
Yeah.
And but the whole the I'm kind of blabbing here because this insight of thinking about that radio plan as a like a value system is so right. It's um and the functional design um response, the cannon and the defense, it's directly about protection and closing off. And so it has become, protecting us from nature. It's it's whoa. Um, I think I need to write something about values. I'm glad you at least pretend to appreciate my humor. Um, it's so it's such a I wonder how much art writing, I think to to think about architecture as your values systems could be really insightful.
I'll dig out that presentation and send it off to you. I did it for a group of educators,
Yeah.
trying to get them to think about school design and how
Mm.
we've done that with schools too. We really still protect because they were very much wanting to bring nature back into education and that kind of stuff. And so I was talking about how design can make a
There was
difference in that regard too.
I think it was a middle school, maybe it was high school in New Haven when I was there. And it was designed by kind of prominent architects, um, Yale graduates, but it was, you think about the whole, like the ugliest, horrible school as prison. Like that was like, think of how bad it could be. This was worse. I remember driving by and like literally there was no windows. It was just, you just see concrete.
Oh,
And probably their intent was protecting kids. And wow, it's
yeah, yeah.
um I think that, anyways, I think that if only in the world of like Kamara and eco people and regenerative thinking, it's like kick them in the ass. Don't the radial design is about protection, it's about fear, it's about being afraid of nature, it's not engaging nature. I think that's a powerful way to talk about it. It is.
Okay, onward and upwards.
Always.
So I'm going to go see if I can advertise this series so we can get people there.
Yeah. Well, that we added a new part of the lessons here, but yeah, it's yeah, anyways, always great. Um yeah,
Maybe
it's
a thought that whose time has come. It's been a long time. It's been 20 some odd years I've been waving that flag.
You're waiting for you? What, 20, what?
Yeah, it's about 20 years I've been waving the flag of values as to understand the consequences of the decision making that comes from those value systems in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, again, it's, we have found each other. And so and so at some aspect, some part of my criticism or why I've concluded that perspective is all screwed up or has make created something that's bad, to be simple about it. There's a value component to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imposing geometry over nature. It's about dominating.
Yep.
Um,
See, and I
and
think that all comes from separation, because when we're separate from everything, we have to be strong enough to deal with all that stuff outside, and we're not. And we know that. So that makes you fearful. And it gets you it's all of a piece. It's all of a piece. It makes you defensive and protective and all those things, because how else are you going to survive with all that?
even like what I get this look at village homes, like the people like the idea of we're going to plant a food forest. Well, no, we won't do that. People are going to steal our fruit. So, I mean, this is
Yeah.
this. So I
Yeah.
mean, just
Like
it's
there's not enough. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that and you just even thinking about the plan of village homes, it's so permeable.
Well, what you just said also triggered another thought in me, that I was thinking of the Seven Samurai. So one of the things that has been true in Asia for a long time, and I don't know if there's a similar pattern here, but that the nomads, the warriors, would come and steal from the farmers, because the nomads didn't have time to grow food. That wasn't what they did. They moved around. They just didn't have the capacity, so they would steal. And then the Japanese incorporated that, so that the samurai served the community through protection, and they were served in turn with food, that kind of thing. And so I wonder, um, off of your comments about the food forest, if to really integrate that, because there's so much. I mean, if you're raising food, you always have more than you need. Okay, there's just nature is
Well,
one.
this is
To incorporate that giving in that framework, that you're not just doing this for you, you're doing this so you can give. And there's a mechanism for giving that's accepted in society, so those who don't want to or can't do that feel empowered and included in the receipt of that food, not diminished by the receipt of that food. Right now we have, we give away food, but
yeah.
it's to poor people who can't do it, and it's our pity patty thing. It's not a responsibility on both sides to accept the food, to recognize its gift of allowing them to be different, and really making that an inherent relationship piece.
So adding on to that, this is good stuff. So I got some things to do, but so adding on to that, so to the idea of if you work with nature, it's always it's more energy efficient, cost effective, and resilient and abundant.
Yeah.
So part of that is abundance. And
Yeah.
I'm and I think thinking back to the Jeff Lawton video, and he's walking around and he's like, hey, this is in 2013, and he says, yeah, I've never seen trees so productive. And he because the reason why is the soil is so freaking moist and healthy.
Yeah.
And I remember and he's walking around and there's just so much fruit on the ground. because so another part of this, what comes from working with nature really well is extraordinarily productive food in abundance.
Yeah.
And you could also say, aside from the fact that the culture is changing and it's not working as, but is that the abundance that comes from working with nature.
Yeah.
And so part of the abundance is, abundance or nature providing for you is that soil cools the community. So if you work with, the abundance, so I'm start folding in the abundance that nature can provide.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the flip side of fear.
Yep.
We don't need to be afraid of people are going to steal our fruit, because we do it right.
There's enough, more than
That
enough.
truth, those trees are going to produce more food, more
Yep.
fruit than.
Yep.
Uh, I I feel kind of proud, arrogant that this the comparing village homes to the, village homes good, radial plan bad, but this conversation is layering more reasons why it's bad. It's deepening that understanding of why it's.
Yeah. Integration is just key, and we're just not very good at it. That's the next step.
This is the question for the Corbett's.
Okay.
It's in that, this idea of protection versus open in
Right.
abundance.
Yeah.
Was that something that they
Thought about.
oh
Okay. Well, I hope they're going to be on. We'll see.
yeah. Well, talk to Ricardo about that in like, so these,
Well, he said he would invite them, so I don't know whether
yeah.
they're available and whether
Well,
he's.
I think that having a relatively younger architect who's telling everybody about it.
Well, that's why I'm hoping, and this is something I'm gonna put together in the morning and send out to everybody that who's participating, that they will come and listen to the other
Yeah. Well,
presentation, so that they can add their wisdom and questions to the
yeah.
richness of the Q&A of each.
But so my thinking is to get, to communicate to the Corbett's these very, like, we are really thinking deeply about it.
Yeah.
So these are really important questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be really great to hear their insights.
And I would like to have Mark as part of that, because I think it will expand what he's already doing. I mean, he's heavy into permaculture and all of that, but I still think this expands it. There's something about the permaculture community. And I feel that Mike has stepped out of that in a way, because he's very into earth repair also. And I think that expands the understanding of permaculture from food into thinking about the world in a different way, which is what I've seen as the real gift of permaculture, is that it's a framework that can be expanded, but so few people have expanded it. I've talked to a couple who are going to write the book and didn't, just because thinking in layers, thinking in guilds, thinking in stacks, understanding multiple functions, those concepts apply to all sorts of things, and
Yeah.
it expands it beyond just the food. And food is
Yeah.
great, but if you don't have climate, you won't have food.
Well, if you don't have, this is the, I mean, to be
Climate trumps it.
self-serving here, I always found it was baffling that these permaculture people, even so, this guy's an architect, I guess, but they don't expand, to use your term, they don't expand it into, as I say, you spend more time thinking about the sun and the carrot than the sun and the building.
Well, and I think your historical perspective really helps with that. If you don't have that historical perspective, you're creating it from scratch now. And that's a much harder thing than to go back and take the wisdom of past ages and bring it forward.
Yeah. Well,
So,
another component of I think why architects and permaculture people don't aren't aware of it, don't incorporate it, because they're they're fools because they think that they have, that like they have to invent something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And fool, but it's part of it's sort of a funny human trait
Yep. Yep.
that like
Yep.
you
That's
you
the ego thing.
stealing from the past. That's not stealing. That's just wisdom from
Yeah.
people been doing it for 1,000 years. There's something to it.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
It's anyways,
Yep.
always
So anyway, so I'm gonna see if I can roust a bunch of landscape and designer folks to attend this thing.
okay. Well, these are some really important lessons and talking points,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
values.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.